The search and rescue mission had lasted 72 hours before being called off. Captain Jessica Parker's F-16 had been completely destroyed, scattered across miles of hostile territory. DNA evidence confirmed her death. Her dog tags were recovered. Her funeral was broadcast on military television. 6 months later, she walked into Ramstein Air Base, very much alive, carrying intelligence that could change the entire Middle East conflict. The problem was, nobody believed she was real. Welcome to one of the most extraordinary military mysteries of the modern era. A story of survival, identity, and secrets that could reshape global warfare. Before we dive into Captain Parker's impossible return from the dead, tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something that nobody believed actually happened? And if you think some military stories are too incredible to be fiction, hit that subscribe button. This story will challenge everything you thought you knew about life, death, and modern warfare. March 15, 2019, began like any other day at Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates. Captain Jessica Phoenix Parker had been flying combat missions over Syria for 8 months. As part of Operation Inherent Resolve, the international coalition's campaign against ISIS and other terrorist organizations operating in the region. At 32 years old, Jessica was one of the Air Force's most experienced F-16 pilots, with over 2,000 flight hours and deployments to 3 different theaters of operation. Her call sign Phoenix had been earned during training when she successfully recovered from a near-fatal spin that should have resulted in ejection and aircraft loss. Instead, she had managed to regain control and land safely, earning her a reputation for being virtually impossible to kill. That morning's mission briefing was routine. Escort a reconnaissance drone over suspected enemy positions near the Syrian-Turkish border, provide air support if needed, and return to base. Intelligence indicated minimal surface-to-air missile threats in the area, and weather conditions were optimal for flight operations. Jessica's F-16C was in perfect mechanical condition, fully fueled and armed with a standard loadout of air-to-air and air-to-ground munition. Her pre-flight inspection revealed no anomalies, and all systems checked out normally during engine start and taxi procedures. At 0630 hours local time, Jessica lifted off from Al Dhafra and set course for Syrian airspace, maintaining radio contact with EDAWACS controllers who were monitoring the mission from their airborne command post. For the first 90 minutes of the flight, everything proceeded according to plan. The last transmission anyone heard from Captain Jessica Parker came at 0883 hours. Phoenix lead, engaging surface target, expect to be off comms for 2 minutes while conducting attack run. She was never heard from again. When Jessica failed to check in after her scheduled 2-minute communication blackout, EDAWACS controllers immediately attempted to re-establish contact. Radio calls went unanswered, and her aircraft's transponder signal had disappeared from radar screen. Within minutes, a massive search and rescue operation was launched. 2 additional F-16s were diverted to Jessica's last known position, while rescue helicopters prepared for immediate deployment into Syrian airspace. Satellite imagery was tasked to scan the area for any sign of aircraft wreckage or pilot survival signals. What the search teams found was devastating. Jessica's F-16 had been completely destroyed in what appeared to be a catastrophic explosion. Wreckage was scattered across more than 5 square miles of rugged terrain, with the largest pieces being no bigger than a car door. The destruction was so complete that it suggested either a direct hit from a surface-to-air missile or some kind of internal explosion. Most critically, there was no sign of pilot ejection. Jessica's ejection seat was found among the wreckage, never having been activated. Flight data recovered from the aircraft's crash-hardened recorder indicated that she had been flying normally right up until the moment of destruction, with no indication of mechanical problems or enemy engagement. The search for Jessica herself continued for 72 hours, with rescue teams combing the crash site and surrounding area for any sign of survival. Ground teams found personal items that had been blown clear of the main wreckage, pieces of her flight suit, fragments of her helmet, and most significantly, her dog tags, which had somehow survived the explosion. But they never found her body. On March 18th, after 3 days of intensive searching, the operation was officially called off. Captain Jessica Parker was declared killed in action, her remains presumed destroyed in the aircraft explosion. The military funeral for Captain Jessica Parker was held at Arlington National Cemetery on March 28, 2019, with full honors befitting a fallen Air Force pilot. The ceremony was attended by over 300 people, including her squadron mates, commanding officers, family members, and Air Force Chief of Staff General David Goldfein. Jessica's parents, Robert and Linda Parker, received the folded American flag that had covered her empty casket. Her fiancé, Major David Chen, a fellow Air Force pilot, delivered a eulogy that was broadcast live on military television networks. Jess always said that flying wasn't just her job, it was her calling, David said, his voice breaking slightly as he addressed the gathered mourner. She believed that defending freedom meant being willing to pay the ultimate price. Today we honor that sacrifice and remember a pilot who gave everything for her country. The funeral made national news, with Jessica being posthumously promoted to major and awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for her final mission. Military officials praised her dedication and sacrifice, using her story as an example of the courage displayed by American service members around the world. Jessica's squadron, the 421st Fighter Squadron Black Widows, held their own memorial ceremony, with her wingman leading a missing man formation flyover that left not a single eye dry among the assembled personnel. Her call sign Phoenix was officially retired, and her name was added to the memorial wall at Al-Dhafra Air Base. Most significantly, Jessica's military records were updated to reflect her death. She was removed from all active duty rosters, her security clearances were revoked, and her personnel file was transferred to archived status. Officially, Major Jessica Parker no longer existed. Her family began the long process of grieving, while her fiancé struggled with the decision of whether to remain in the Air Force or leave military service. The Air Force conducted a thorough investigation into the circumstances of her loss, concluding that she had been the victim of an undetected surface-to-air missile system. For 6 months, Major Jessica Parker remained dead, mourned by her family and honored by her service. Life moved on without her, as it does for all fallen heroes. Then everything changed. September 22, 2019, was a quiet Sunday morning at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. The base's main gate was operating with minimal staffing, processing routine traffic from personnel returning from weekend leave and local German civilians who worked on base. At approximately 0847 hours, a woman approached the main security checkpoint on foot. She was dirty, exhausted, and wearing civilian clothes that appeared to have been through significant hardship. Her hair was shorter and darker than it had been 6 months earlier, and she carried a weathered backpack that looked like military issue. "I need to speak with base commander immediately," she told the Air Force Security Forces sergeant at the gate. "I'm Major Jessica Parker, 421st Fighter Squadron. I've been missing in action for 6 months, and I have critical intelligence that needs to reach command authority right away." The sergeant, Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, looked at the woman with obvious skepticism. Major Jessica Parker had been killed in action 6 months earlier. Everyone on base knew the story. This was clearly either a mentally disturbed individual, or possibly some kind of security threat. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification," Rodriguez replied, following standard procedures for dealing with suspicious individuals. The woman reached into her backpack and produced a military ID card. The photo matched her face, though she looked significantly older and more weathered than the picture suggested. The name on the card read Major Jessica Parker, with security clearances that made Rodriguez's eyes widen. "Ma'am, there's a problem with this ID," Rodriguez said carefully. "Major Parker was killed in action in March. I attended her memorial service myself." Jessica looked at him with eyes that seemed to carry months of hardship and secrets. "Sergeant, I understand this is confusing. I understand that everyone believes I'm dead, but I need you to contact Colonel Morrison's office immediately and tell him that Phoenix has returned with Lazarus Protocol intelligence." The phrase Lazarus Protocol was not one that Rodriguez recognized, but something about the woman's demeanor and the specific way she referenced Colonel Morrison suggested this wasn't a typical security incident. Rodriguez made the call that would change everything. Within 20 minutes of Jessica's arrival at the main gate, Ramstein Air Base was in controlled chaos. Colonel Morrison, the base commander, had immediately implemented security protocols usually reserved for potential terrorist incidents. Jessica was transported under guard to a secure facility normally used for debriefing high-value intelligence assets. The first challenge was confirming her identity. Standard biometric scanners were used to compare her fingerprints and facial structure to military databases. The results were impossible to deny. This woman was physically identical to Major Jessica Parker in every measurable way. But Major Jessica Parker was dead. They had buried her 6 months ago. Sarah Kim, a military psychologist specializing in trauma and identity disorders, was brought in to evaluate Jessica's mental state. The possibility existed that this woman genuinely believed she was Jessica Parker, perhaps suffering from some form of dissociative identity disorder or elaborate delusion. "State your full name, rank and serial number," Dr. Kim began during the initial interview. Major Jessica Marie Parker, United States Air Force, service number 2847-6391-4728. Jessica replied without hesitation. "What was your last duty assignment?" 421 1st Fighter Squadron, Al Dhafra Air Base, United Arab Emirates. Flying F-16C Block 50 aircraft in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. Dr. Kim continued with increasingly specific questions about Jessica's background, training and service history. The woman answered every question correctly, displaying knowledge that would be impossible for an imposter to possess. She knew classified details about missions, personal information about squadron mates, and technical specifications about aircraft that weren't available in any public sources. Most convincingly, she bore physical scars that matched Jessica's military medical records exactly. A small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident, surgical marks from an appendectomy performed during her Air Force Academy year, and a distinctive birthmark on her shoulder that had been documented during her initial physical examination. But the most disturbing aspect of the interview was Jessica's knowledge of events that had occurred after her supposed death. She knew about personnel changes in her squadron, new equipment that had been delivered to Al Dhafra, and operational details from missions that had taken place months after her funeral. "How could you know about Operation Desert Falcon?" Kim asked, referring to a classified mission that had taken place in July. "That operation was planned and executed after you were declared killed in action." Jessica's response was simple and chilling. "Because I was there." Over the course of 3 days, Jessica underwent intensive interrogation by military intelligence officers, psychologists, and medical personnel. Gradually, an impossible story began to emerge, one that challenged everything the military understood about her disappearance and apparent death. According to Jessica, she had not been shot down by enemy forces on March 15th. Instead, her aircraft had been damaged by what she described as unconventional weapons, technology that shouldn't have existed in Syrian hands. As her F-16 became uncontrollable, she had managed to eject, but not before activating what she called Lazarus Protocol. "Lazarus Protocol isn't something we talk about in normal briefings," Jessica explained to her interrogators. "It's a black project, compartmentalized beyond normal classification levels. When a pilot activates Lazarus Protocol, their aircraft is designed to completely self-destruct, leaving evidence that suggests pilot death while actually facilitating covert insertion into hostile territory." The story that followed was even more incredible. According to Jessica, she had spent the past 6 months operating undercover behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence on advanced weapons systems that hostile forces were developing with the assistance of foreign powers. "The technology I encountered isn't just Syrian or Russian," Jessica continued. "There are weapons being tested in that region that represent generational leaps beyond anything we thought possible. Electronic warfare systems that can disable aircraft from hundreds of miles away. Directed energy weapons that can vaporize targets without leaving conventional explosive residue." Jessica claimed that her mission had been to infiltrate enemy research facilities, document these weapon systems, and gather intelligence that could protect future American operations in the region. The intelligence she had gathered was stored in encrypted files that she had carried during her 6-month journey back to American-controlled territory. But perhaps the most disturbing part of her story was the implication that her supposed death had been deliberately orchestrated by American intelligence agencies. According to Jessica, Lazarus Protocol was designed to create convincing evidence of pilot death, while actually inserting highly trained operators into situations where traditional special operations forces couldn't operate. "My family attended my funeral," Jessica said quietly during one interview. "My fiancé grieved for me. Do you understand what that means? I've been alive for 6 months while everyone I love believed I was dead. The intelligence officers facing Jessica had to grapple with possibilities that seemed equally unlikely. Either this woman was suffering from the most elaborate delusion in military history, or the United States Air Force had developed capabilities that existed in the deepest levels of classified projects. Colonel Morrison faced an unprecedented decision. If this woman was genuinely Major Jessica Parker, then she possessed intelligence that could be crucial to American military operations in the Middle East. But if she was an elaborate deception, perhaps a foreign intelligence operation designed to infiltrate American military systems, then treating her as legitimate could compromise national security. The verification process that followed was the most intensive in modern military history. Jessica was subjected to polygraph examinations administered by the military's most experienced interrogators. She passed every test, showing no indicators of deception even when asked about the most incredible aspects of her story. DNA analysis confirmed that she was biologically identical to Jessica Parker. Advanced facial recognition software confirmed that her bone structure and biometric markers matched military records. Even dental records, which had been used to help identify remains at the crash site, were an exact match. But the most compelling evidence came from the intelligence Jessica had brought with her. The encrypted files on her portable storage devices contained technical specifications for weapons systems that American intelligence agencies had only theorized about. Photographs, video recordings, and technical documents showed enemy capabilities that explained several recent military setbacks in the region. This intelligence fills gaps that we've been trying to understand for months, admitted Colonel Patricia Hayes, the senior intelligence officer reviewing Jessica's materials. Equipment failures, communication blackouts, aircraft losses that we couldn't explain. It all makes sense if hostile forces have access to the technology described in these files. The intelligence was so valuable that it immediately changed operational planning for multiple ongoing missions. Aircraft were rerouted, communication protocols were updated, and new defensive measures were implemented based on Jessica's warnings about enemy capabilities. But verification of the intelligence created new questions about Jessica's story. If the information was accurate, and initial analysis suggested it was, then how had one pilot managed to gather such comprehensive data while operating alone behind enemy lines for 6 months? The answer came when military investigators began tracing Jessica's activities during her supposed death. Satellite imagery, when reviewed with knowledge of what to look for, showed subtle evidence of her presence in areas where intelligence gathering had occurred. Communication intercepts, previously dismissed as background noise, contained coded transmissions that matched protocols Jessica claimed to have used. Most significantly, other classified operations in the region began to make more sense when viewed through the lens of Jessica's intelligence-gathering mission. 3 weeks after Jessica's return, Colonel Morrison received a visit from General Patricia Williams, a senior Air Force officer whose official title provided no indication of her actual responsibility. General Williams' arrival at Ramstein was not announced through normal channels, and her meeting with Morrison was held in a secure facility normally reserved for the most sensitive intelligence briefings. "Colonel, I need to discuss the Jessica Parker situation with you," General Williams began. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that exceed your current clearance, but circumstances require that you be briefed." What followed was a revelation that explained everything Jessica had experienced while raising new questions about the nature of modern military operations. Lazarus Protocol was real. It was a joint project between the Air Force, CIA, and Defense Intelligence Agency, designed to insert highly trained personnel into hostile territory under circumstances that provided perfect cover for their presence. Pilots participating in Lazarus Protocol were volunteer special operations personnel who had been extensively trained for long-term survival and intelligence gathering behind enemy lines. Major Parker volunteered for Lazarus Protocol 18 months ago, General Williams explained. She underwent specialized training that prepared her for exactly the kind of mission she just completed. The aircraft destruction, the false DNA evidence, even the recovered dog tags, all of it was designed to create convincing proof of death while facilitating her insertion into Syrian territory. The program was so highly classified that most military personnel, including Jessica's squadron mates and commanding officers, had no knowledge of its existence. Even Colonel Morrison, despite his senior position, had not been briefed on Lazarus Protocol until Jessica's return made disclosure necessary. But why wasn't I informed that one of my pilots was participating in a black project? Morrison asked. Because the success of Lazarus Protocol depends on authentic reactions from everyone involved, General Williams replied. Jessica's squadron mates, her family, even her fiancé, their grief had to be genuine because hostile intelligence services monitor our reactions to pilot losses. Any indication that her death was fabricated would have compromised her mission and put her life at risk. The revelation explained Jessica's knowledge of events that had occurred after her supposed death. She had maintained covert communication with her handlers throughout her mission, receiving updates on squadron activities and operational changes that might affect her intelligence-gathering efforts. But it also meant that Jessica's family and fiancé had spent 6 months grieving for someone who was alive and working behind enemy lines. The hardest part of Jessica's return wasn't the debriefing or intelligence analysis. It was facing the people who had mourned her death. Her parents had spent 6 months learning to live with the loss of their daughter. Her fiancé had begun the painful process of moving on with his life. The reunion with her family took place in a secure facility at Ramstein, with military psychologists present to help manage what was expected to be an emotionally devastating experience. Jessica, her mother whispered when she first saw her daughter, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might make her disappear again. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jessica replied, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." The reunion was everything that military planners had feared it would be. Joy at Jessica's survival was mixed with anger at the deception, confusion about what had been real, and trauma from months of unnecessary grief. Jessica's father, a retired Air Force colonel himself, understood the operational necessities that had required the deception, but struggled with the personal cost. "They let us bury an empty casket," he said quietly. "We grieved for you while you were alive. How do we process that?" The reunion with her fiancé was even more difficult. Major David Shin had not only grieved for Jessica's death, but had begun dating another officer in an attempt to move forward with his life. Jessica's return created an impossible situation for everyone involved. "I mourned you," David told Jessica during their private conversation. "I delivered your eulogy. I folded your flag. And now you're back. And I don't know how to feel about that." Military psychologists worked with Jessica and her family to process the complex emotions surrounding her return from the dead. The experience was unprecedented in military history, requiring the development of new therapeutic approaches for dealing with what they termed resurrection trauma. Jessica herself struggled with guilt over the pain her mission had caused her loved ones. While she understood the operational necessities that had required the deception, the knowledge that her family had suffered unnecessarily haunted her more than her 6 months behind enemy line. "I spent 6 months in hostile territory thinking about getting home to my family," Jessica said during one therapy session. "I never thought about what it would mean that they believed I was dead." While Jessica worked through the emotional challenges of her return, military analysts continued to process the intelligence she had gathered during her mission. What they discovered was a game-changing revelation about enemy capabilities in the Middle East. The weapons systems Jessica had documented represented a significant technological leap that American intelligence agencies had not anticipated. Enemy forces had access to electronic warfare capabilities that could disable aircraft communications and guidance systems from extreme distances. More troubling, the technology appeared to be a hybrid of Russian, Chinese, and previously unknown innovation. The implications of this intelligence extend far beyond the Middle East theater, explained Dr. Robert Manning, a senior analyst with the Defense Intelligence Agency. "If hostile forces have access to these capabilities, it changes how we approach military operations globally." Jessica's intelligence revealed that several recent military setbacks, previously attributed to equipment failure or tactical errors, had actually resulted from enemy use of advanced electronic warfare systems. Aircraft losses, communication failures, and navigation problems that had puzzled military investigators now made sense in the context of the weapons Jessica had documented. Most significantly, her intelligence indicated that enemy forces were planning to use these weapons systems in a coordinated attack designed to cripple American air power in the region. The attack, scheduled for October 15th, would target multiple air bases simultaneously using weapons that American forces had no defense against. Major Parker's intelligence gave us advance warning of an attack that would have been catastrophic. General Williams later testified to congressional oversight committees. Her mission prevented losses that could have changed the entire strategic balance in the Middle East. Based on Jessica's intelligence, American forces implemented new defensive measures, altered operational patterns, and developed countermeasures for the electronic warfare systems she had identified. The planned enemy attack on October 15th was disrupted before it could begin, with hostile forces finding their targets defended by capabilities they hadn't expected. The success of these defensive measures validated Jessica's intelligence and demonstrated the value of Lazarus Protocol operations. Jessica's successful mission led to expanded discussion of Lazarus Protocol within the highest levels of military and intelligence leadership. The program had proven its effectiveness, but at enormous personal cost to the operators and their families. The intelligence value is undeniable, acknowledged Secretary of Defense Mark Esper during classified briefings about the program. But we need to consider whether the psychological cost to personnel and their families is sustainable. Military ethicists raised concerns about a program that required deceiving families about the deaths of their loved ones. While the operational security benefits were clear, the moral implications of causing uncertain grief were troubling to many observers. Jessica herself became an advocate for modifying Lazarus Protocol procedures to minimize family trauma. There has to be a way to maintain operational security without putting families through the hell of believing their loved one is dead, she argued during program review meetings. Proposed modifications included developing cover stories that would explain pilot disappearances without requiring false death notifications, establishing secure communication methods that would allow limited family contact during missions, and providing enhanced psychological support for families of Lazarus Protocol operators. But perhaps the most significant outcome of Jessica's mission was the recognition that modern warfare increasingly required operations that blurred the lines between traditional military service and intelligence gathering. Lazarus Protocol represented a new model for inserting highly trained personnel into situations where conventional special operations forces couldn't operate effectively. Major Parker's mission demonstrates that our most valuable intelligence assets may be our regular military personnel operating in unconventional roles, noted CIA Director Gina Haspel. The future of intelligence gathering may depend on operators like her. 6 months after Jessica's return, she was called to testify before a closed session of the House Intelligence Committee about Lazarus Protocol and her mission behind enemy lines. The hearing was classified at the highest levels, with only committee members and essential staff permitted to attend. Major Parker asked Congressman Adam Schiff, the committee chairman, "Can you help us understand how a program like Lazarus Protocol was developed and implemented without broader congressional oversight?" Jessica's testimony provided lawmakers with their first detailed look at a program that had operated in the deepest levels of classification. She explained the rigorous selection process for Lazarus Protocol operators, the extensive training required, and the operational necessities that made the program valuable despite its controversial aspects. "The intelligence I gathered during my mission prevented an attack that would have killed hundreds of American service members," Jessica testified. "But I also understand the concerns about a program that requires families to believe their loved ones are dead." Congressional questioning focused on oversight mechanisms, ethical considerations, and the long-term sustainability of operations that required such elaborate deceptions. Lawmakers struggled with balancing national security needs against the moral implications of programs like Lazarus Protocol. How do we ensure that programs like this don't operate beyond appropriate oversight? Asked Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Respectfully, ma'am, Jessica replied, the effectiveness of this program depends on limiting the number of people who know about it. But I believe there should be mechanisms for family support that don't compromise operational security. The hearing resulted in new oversight requirements for special access programs, enhanced psychological support for families of personnel involved in classified operations, and modified procedures for Lazarus Protocol that reduced family trauma while maintaining operational effectiveness. 2 years after her return from the dead, Jessica faced decisions about her future that no military career counselor had ever prepared for. Her successful Lazarus Protocol mission had made her one of the most valuable intelligence assets in the American military. But the personal costs continued to affect every aspect of her life. Her relationship with her fiancé had not survived her return. The combination of grief, anger, and confusion about what had been real proved too much for their relationship to overcome. David Chen eventually left the Air Force and returned to civilian life, unable to reconcile his mourning for Jessica with her actual survival. "I loved the woman I thought I had lost," David explained during their final conversation, "but I don't know how to love someone who let me believe she was dead." Jessica's relationship with her parents gradually healed, though it required extensive family therapy and careful rebuilding of trust. They eventually came to understand the operational necessities that had required the deception, but the experience changed their family dynamics permanently. "We're grateful she's alive," her father said during a later interview, "but we'll never forget the 6 months we spent believing she was dead. That's not something you can just move past." Professionally, Jessica found herself at a crossroads. Her success with Lazarus Protocol made her a prime candidate for additional special operations missions. But she struggled with the moral implications of programs that required such elaborate deceptions. "I joined the Air Force to serve my country," Jessica said during a career counseling session. "But I need to serve in ways that don't require destroying my family relationships." After extensive consideration, Jessica chose to remain in the Air Force, but transitioned to a role that allowed her to use her experience without participating in additional Lazarus Protocol missions. She became an instructor for special operations personnel, teaching survival techniques and intelligence gathering methods to the next generation of operators. Jessica's experience led to significant modifications in Lazarus Protocol procedures. While the program continued to operate, new safeguards were implemented to reduce the psychological impact on operators and their families. Modified protocols included the development of cover stories that explained operator disappearances without requiring false death notifications. Families were told that their loved ones were participating in classified operations that required extended periods of no communication, but they were not led to believe that death had occurred. "We learned that operational security can be maintained without causing unnecessary trauma to families," explained General Williams during a program review. "Major Parker's experience taught us that the human cost of our operations must be considered alongside their intelligence value." Enhanced psychological support systems were developed for both operators and their families. Regular though limited communication was established through secure channels, allowing families to know that their loved ones were alive even if they couldn't know operational details. The program also implemented more rigorous ethical review procedures, ensuring that future Lazarus Protocol missions were subjected to enhanced oversight and approval processes. Jessica's intelligence gathering techniques became part of standard training for special operations personnel across all service branches. Her methods for maintaining cover while operating behind enemy lines, gathering technical intelligence, and evading capture were incorporated into survival, evasion, resistance, and escape SARE training program. Most significantly, her mission demonstrated the value of using regular military personnel for unconventional intelligence operations, leading to expanded training programs that prepared conventional forces for special operations roles. Today, Major Jessica Parker serves as Director of Special Operations Training at the Air Force's Survival School, where she prepares military personnel for the challenges of operating behind enemy lines. Her experience as the ghost pilot has become a classified case study used throughout the military intelligence community. The intelligence she gathered during her 6 months in hostile territory continues to inform American military operations in the Middle East. The electronic warfare countermeasures, developed based on her intelligence, have prevented numerous aircraft losses and saved countless lives. But perhaps more importantly, Jessica's story has changed how the military approaches the balance between operational effectiveness and human cost. Programs like Lazarus Protocol continue to operate, but with enhanced safeguards that protect the psychological well-being of operators and their families. "My mission was successful because I was willing to sacrifice everything for my country," Jessica reflected during a recent interview. "But I learned that everything includes the trust and emotional well-being of the people I love most. That's a cost that should be avoided whenever possible." The story of the ghost pilot reminds us that modern warfare often requires sacrifices that extend far beyond the battlefield. Intelligence operations, special missions, and classified programs exact human costs that are rarely visible to the public but profoundly affect the personnel and families involved. Jessica's return from the dead proved that some military capabilities exist at levels of classification that challenge our understanding of what's possible. But it also proved that the most advanced military technology and most sophisticated operational planning cannot eliminate the human element of warfare. So I ask you, how much should military personnel sacrifice for national security? Should family relationships be expendable in the service of intelligence operations? Because Jessica Parker's story teaches us that even the most successful missions carry costs that extend far beyond their immediate operational objective. If this story of sacrifice, deception, and the price of classified operations moved you, share it with someone who needs to understand the hidden costs of military service. Subscribe to make sure you never miss stories that reveal the complex realities behind military operations. Remember, in a world where national security often requires operations that can't be publicly acknowledged, sometimes the greatest heroes are those who sacrifice not just their lives, but their identities, their relationships, and their place in the world. Jessica Parker died on March 15, 2019. And she also didn't die. Understanding that paradox is understanding the true nature of modern warfare.